Welcome then to episode 3 of Garbage Kind of Bike into a Gravel or Adventure Bike. Today we're going to run through a build up of the bike. As you can see, it's not totally stripped down. It's kind of in the same state that I got it, other than, well, Doddy was having a little play around actually with these brakes because he had no bikes kicking around and he wanted to see exactly how they work. So the rear canties, they've already been fitted, but as for the rest, well, let's get to work. Let's start off with the wheels then. So we turn this bike into something that resembles more of a bike to start with. So we're going to fit the rear cassette, or well, the only cassette, onto the wheels. So just going to whip out the quick release skewer and of course then slide that Shimano cassette on. Remember, I've gone for a 10-speed cassette here, 11 to 34. And of course we want to make sure that the splines of the cassette match up with the splines of the free hub body. So you can see here we've got one which is different from all of the rest, which makes it oh so simple to install. Of course, depending on what type of free hub you've got and what style of cassette body, depends exactly on how it's going to go on there. Now, sometimes you actually have to put a very thin washer behind the actual cassette body, behind the cassette and on the free hub body. It takes up a little bit of slack, but I have had a little play around behind the scenes and I didn't actually need this today, but sometimes you do, and they are pretty thin, those washers. They are thinner than a spacer in between a cassette sprocket. I remember years ago I once had to file one down for a rider and try and get that nice and flat to make sure his gears are indexing right, and that was an absolute nightmare. Right, so it's on there absolutely fine. Before I put on that lock ring and torque it up to 40 Newton meters, I'm just going to put a little bit of my favourite on there, a little bit of grease, just to make sure that it's okay when it comes to removing it in the future, if we decide to. So I'm just going to put a little dab of that on there, and then that'll all be okay. As you can see, the toothbrush, still not replaced it, pretty manky, covered in grease, but just going to give that a little bit of coating. Try not to drop all of your bits. Benefit of having a nice clean workshop floor there, nothing gets lost. Of course, if you're doing it at home, maybe we'll drop something down your floorboard. That'd be a nightmare, wouldn't it? Right, it's on there. Just tighten it up by hand, just at first, with a little cassette tool on there. Then I'll put it into the torque wrench and put it up to 40 Newton meters. Of course, that just relies on everything being here in the right place. Who was in here last? Doddy, I bet. Right, then it's just a case of refitting that skewer. There is already a light amount of grease on there, so I'm not going to worry about putting anything extra on. So I'm going to weigh down this bike even more. It weighs a ton. But it's not a lightweight bike, let's face it. So we're going to put that wheel in. So got horizontal dropouts on here, slightly old school. They're not that long, but we'll make sure when you're putting a wheel in a dropout like this, you want to sort of use your thumbs on the seat stays to push that wheel back into place. Now I will always put wheels in normally when the bike is on, well, out of a work stand, because you can just work with gravity, but on this I can definitely feel it's totally and utterly butted up against the end of those fork ends. Locked it up nice and tight. There we are. All right, let's put the front one in and let's get to work on this beauty. After years and years of doing this sort of thing, you know how much pressure to put, and then when you know it's locked in slightly, you can work with your other hand. It's quite difficult to explain, but after donkey's years it feels like. Tell you what, super smooth, these hubs. That's spot on. Headset, luckily, that's nice and smooth too, so I don't have to do anything with that. I must have taken care of this one before I, well, let it fall to the bottom of the shed. And again, the axle there at the bottom bracket, that's nice and good too. There's no play in that. No. You wonder why I'm looking away. Now the reason being is that sometimes when you look down there and you see something rocking, it's because the bike is rocking in the work stand. So it's easier just to use your senses, or take away one of your senses, in this case my eyes, and just try and feel for anything, try and listen for anything. No, nothing at all there, so that's absolutely great. Good news, don't have to worry about any bearings or anything like that inside of there. From memory, those were actually inside of a cage, so it was nice and easy, so there's nothing going to fall apart. Loads of bearings though, you have to fill up the cups of those bottom brackets and then put each bearing in separately, and then hope that when you put the axle through, they don't all fall out onto the floor and you lose them through that well, gap in the floorboards. Yeah, you can tell I've had that happen to me in the past. Right, so we've got that done. Now you'll remember I had that quill to A head stem converter. Here it is, I've put a stem on it. Looks absolutely horrific right now, doesn't it? But also cast your minds back and you'll remember exactly why I decided to go for one of these. And the reason being, it's so simple to swap out the actual stem itself in order to get your position right and everything. And another reason being, you remember I had that cable hanger that I was going to put on in between the two nuts, so the actual adjusting nut and the locking nut of the headset. Sadly, whilst tinkering around, honestly I can't help myself, it's a bit of a problem I've got, I suppose. I wanted to do this all on video for you, but I just wanted to make sure that everything was going to be spot on. And there wasn't enough thread on the fork steerer for that cable hanger to go in between the two. So it meant I was either going to have to go out and try and find a different headset, 1/8" threaded, fairly common I guess, but I didn't want to spend too much money on it. So went down actually to a local bike shop and had a rummage around in their parts drawer and found this cable hanger. However, along came another problem. So this is designed for a 28.6 clamp, which happens to be what this stem is fitted onto, 28.6 at the top. The bottom bit though is 25.4, so I've had to shim it out. And what I actually just decided to go for here, at first I experimented with some bits of aluminium can, thin stuff. In the end, I actually went for an inner tube that I wrapped around really, really tightly. I had to get a couple of lads in the office as well to help me with it. Hence why I've not done it on camera, because these arms weren't really up to the job. But I managed to get it on there. And I've also put a different stem on. The reason being, when I would have the bars in the stem, the routing of the cable, it just, a normal stem would be at such an angle that the cable wouldn't be able to enter here sufficiently or efficiently, even if you like. So what I have got is a V-brake noodle. That's right. So that will go in here like so, and it means I'm going to be able to get a brake outer in there and I'm going to be able to use it. It's a bit of a hack, it's a bit of a bodge, but it should work. I don't see why not. There's no reason for it not to. And like you can see there, if I had any other stem that was going downwards whatsoever, this noodle wouldn't work unless I was then going to trim that off. But I don't really like to trim things down that much, so there we are. Right, anyway, we'll fit this into the fork steerer. Now I've got that little story out of the way. I think you lot tend to like that though, when I sort of go on about these exact reasons, you know, the real technical bits. So I'm going to grease up this. We'll also put some on the thread in there too. We are going to be playing around with this really, just to get the position absolutely spot on at some point. So I'm not going to worry too much because I can easily put a bit more on, but you can never have too much grease on these things. As that old frame builder, a good friend of mine who's no longer with us, told me one day, every 6 months, everything off, re-grease, put it back together. We don't have to worry about that so much these days, but about 20 odd years ago, I remember going down there to see him and yeah, getting a bit of a lecture off of him, and I've always listened to those words, or, you know, I've always taken care of those words from then on. So there we are. I'm going to put that down in there and then just tighten up that stem. So the expander plug, expander bolt, expander wedge is going to go up against that steerer tube internally. Get it as lined up as well as we can before we go to fit the bars on. Let's put the bars in place inside of that stem. Nice and simple job here really. 4-bolt stem, 4mm Allen key. It's lucky. Do that. Just get these bolts off. Again, every mechanic's favourite, a bit of grease. It's nice though, isn't it? Carbon fibre front plate. Lucky. Oh, it does look good. Right, okay, we'll put a bit of grease on those bolts before we'll torque them up. 6 Newton meters, so not a lot. Years ago, saw guys building bikes on a production line at Ridley in Belgium, and they had air tools. It was the first time actually I'd ever seen anyone using air tools to put bikes together, and it was so quick, so efficient. They were all dangling down, so they didn't really have to reach or anything. They just grabbed them and went from there. I think a full bike, they would build it up in approximately 35 minutes. And then a cross bike that had a load of cable runs. Of course, they got, for disc brakes and everything, and Di2, and ETAP, EPS, all of those. You had a lot more cable runs, whereas these days it's pretty simple. But yeah, they take about 45 minutes for a cross bike. They had a guy as well, just all day long, he just put tyres on rims. That was it, all day long. I bet he pinched a few. Not that he stole them, I don't mean that. I mean, he pinched a few inner tubes, putting them on all day. So, just do it. So of course, when you put things like this on, you try and keep an even gap top and bottom most of the time. Not always, it depends on the stem, but this one, for instance, you do. And you never tighten both of them at the top, up to 6 Newton meters, and then do the bottom. You work opposites, so you work there, then there, then there, and then there. Generally. Can depend, of course, on the stem, the manufacturer, the pattern, all of that, but you want the gap to be the same. Therefore, you've got the same clamping pressure, both upper and lower. So just undo that one a fraction, just so I can slide them along. Handy marks on here too, so you can see how central it is. Helps for someone like me who doesn't have the best eyesight. Right. We can worry about the angle of the bars a bit later on, but we'll try and get the bike as straight as possible in the work stand. So, there you go. Those bars, they're at a right bad angle there, aren't they? Oh, terrible. So we'll just loosen that, just rotate it around a fraction, like so. Then we'll put the other bolts in before torquing them up to the 6 Newton meter. So I'm going to put the chainring onto this crankset now, and as you can see, one of the mounting bolts is hidden away behind the spider. So if you were to have some chainring bolts have a hex key or an Allen key head on both sides, meaning that if you try to put one in there, it just wouldn't work, right? So that's why we've got the standard sort of nuts that have got these slots in them, which go on the back side. And of course, we've got these pretty funky blue anodized bolts here. You want to make sure you don't do these up really, really tight. And importantly, you use, yep, you've guessed it right, some grease, because alloy and the steel, those two things, they can combine together and they are very, very difficult to remove, and you end up having to drill out one of the two components. So what we use to actually hold these nuts in place is this very cool tool here. It's called CW2 actually, I think it's, or CNW2 in fact, from Park. Come in different widths on each end, very, very slightly different I believe. And the way that works is that it holds the actual nut in place like so, thanks to the serrations in the nut and then the tool, the way it's designed. It means you can hold it with one hand and then do up the bolt with the other. Really great bit of kit here. Before I had one of these as a youngster, I used to have to use a screwdriver or just hope it would stay in place when you were trying to tighten or untighten the chainring bolts. But we are going to put, yeah, you guessed it, a little bit of grease. And as for mounting the chainring, for the time being, I'm actually going to put it on the outer side until I go out on the bike and see how the chain line runs, because it's going to look better in it. And well, we want it to look good on this video, let's face it. So rather than going on the inside where, just doesn't do it, does it? I don't think so anyway. So we're going to go with that for the time being. There's no specific place to line it up or anything. You know, the logos, they're all the way around it, these race face logos, pretty cool. And we will just put a few bits of grease. You only need to put a very small amount actually on each one of these chainring bolts, but just enough that you've got some on there, because when you're tightening it up, it will get pushed around no problem. It can be a little bit fiddly when it comes to actually tightening up these chainring bolts. And again, you do it not necessarily in a circular motion when you do the final tightening. When you're assembling it, not a problem at all. You can just, you know, work your way around, but you want to make sure you work almost opposites, like a star, if you like, when you're putting it together. So there we go. So we'll just put that on, make sure it's nicely lined up like so. So again, I've done that up really, really loosely for the time being. Just enough. I'll just put a bit more on there. And of course, when you're torquing these up, you don't want to use the same amount of torque as you would on a pair of steel chainring bolts you might find on some old bikes, because they can cope with it a lot more. Soft alloy heads of bolts, they're not designed to be really, really torqued up. And you need to use decent tools as well to make sure you don't round off the heads inside of them. This last one, this is going to be the fiddle, because look at it, where it is. Not much room in there, have we? Bit of a guessing game as well. Well, not really guessing game, almost like fishing here. We're going to push this around, get that down in the chainring. There we go. That's in place. That tool, maybe it'll fit in there, maybe not. No. I can see now why that man at the cycle jumble about 20 years ago or 15 years ago sold this to me on the cheap. But I can use a little screwdriver to definitely hold that in place, you know, in those slots before tightening it up. And sometimes they do even just catch in the metal of the actual chainring itself. So you can see there, it's actually caught. How good is that? Look, no more spinning. What a result. Imagine that didn't work. The grief you lot would give. Shivers down my spine. Right, so now we can just go around and just work them up to a decent amount of pressure. I'm not going to use a torque wrench for this. I've done so many aluminium chainring bolts over the years. I know where the limits are. And it, as weird as that sounds, you just feel, you can just feel it. Final one, the back side. There we go. Doesn't look too bad, does it? It'll do. So yeah, we'll put that then onto the axle. You want to make sure actually on square taper bottom brackets. Now some people, they put grease on them for some reason. And I said last time when I built up that single speed bike, the reason I don't do that, because if there's grease on there and if the taper of either the bottom bracket or the internal taper of that chain set or the left hand crank is not quite good, and there's a bit of wear in there, that grease almost acts as like a cutting paste. So as you're pedaling along, it begins to wear away the softer alloy component generally of the chain set, and then it's going to leave you with essentially a damaged chain set. So we're not going to do that. I just need to grab a little bit of shop towel just to make sure it is nice and clean before putting that on and doing up the chain set bolt, or the crank arm bolt. And we'll put the left hand side one on too. A little bit of grease, so we'll just make sure there's none on there. All right, and what I'm going to use first up is actually the crank arm bolt to tighten it in place, and then I'm going to replace it and use the standard Allen key bolts to put it on there. The reason being, like I said last time, this really just allows you to put a little bit more pressure in there and gives a better feel when tightening it up. So we'll just put that onto the square taper. We'll get that nice and tight on there before taking it out and putting it in with a normal bolt. I can already tell you that chain line is not going to be the best, so we are going to, I reckon, change that chainring around after a ride or two just to get it in the right place. Yeah, it's going to go on the inside, pretty sure of it. So let's take that off. I can do that with the chain set in place, no biggie whatsoever to actually change that over. So I'm just going to put that normal crank box in there now. I say normal, these aren't really normal if you're a little bit old school like I am. So I've just dabbed a little bit of grease on there again, put it there on the end, and we'll just put it inside. This doesn't need to be up massively tight because I've just done the crank bolts up really tight with that big extension bar on there. I haven't chosen yet actually what pedals to put on this bike. Something wonderfully retro, I think. Maybe a pair of toe clips. Okay, time for that left-hand crank to go on. And worth making sure there's just nothing kicking about inside of that. Of course, line it up in the correct place. This bottom bracket is pretty long. I guess I'd say it's probably over 120mm wide. I could even, if I wanted to fit a standard, sealed cartridge bottom bracket on there, a modern day bit of kit, probably go down to like 115, something like that, just to try and get it in a bit more. But for the time being, I think it'll work fine. But once you've got it on there nice and tight, just back it off and I'm going to replace it. I just prefer it actually to use these. I have got some crank caps here. Plastic chrome bits, yeah, they just, no, they don't look that good, do they? So that's why we're putting on a pair of the standard, these Allen key end bits and pieces. They'll go on there. There we are. You know the drill by now. Any thread near enough, we put some grease on there or a bit of Loctite. Depends where it is on the bike. Don't say I didn't warn you. Every 6 months. Right, let's fit this GRX rear mech on then. I'm only going to do the first bit of it. I'm not going to put the cables in just yet because I need to put the brake levers on. But the good news is I have pre-greased the bolt. That's right, so I don't have to go through that whole rigmarole again. Although some of you quite like the old grease count. So let's just fit that into that rear derailleur hanger. Of course, this bike doesn't have a replaceable one. What were they thinking back in the day on mountain bikes? Well, everything was a bit of a mystery back then, I suppose, wasn't it? But we've got a couple of tabs here. Just want to make sure they're in the right place. Taking it out as a stopper, if you like. So you remember it's a clutch rear mech on this one. So at the moment it doesn't have the clutch activated. And when I flick the magic switch, look at that, it moves, of course, as a parallelogram in the right direction. So we can change gear, but importantly, there's no travel in that rear arm there in this direction, so like in a downwards direction, meaning the good news is your chain is not going to be rattling around, bouncing around and causing loads of trouble. Let's check out the alignment of it. Looks pretty good. I just need to give it a gentle turn of the screws, the high and low ones. It looks to be a little bit too far outward on the H screw, so we'll just tighten that inwards just to get that jockey wheel lined up underneath it. Sometimes you want it just a little bit further to the outside, if you like, to aid any gear shifts, but you don't want it to be too much over. Whew, this is starting to look good actually. Well, I think it's going to look nice without a front derailleur on it. Yeah. Right, let's put some levers on it. Let's get it cabled up because, well, we're nearly there now. So let's fit the levers onto the bars. Someone obviously thought they were doing me a bit of a favour at my desk because I had cables lying around and bits and pieces and the levers, and they decided to wire them up. And, well, they've put a shifting cable in the left-hand lever. Well, we don't have a front derailleur in there, so whoever that was, it was probably Ollie. He tends to fiddle around a lot with bits and pieces. He's well, created me a little bit of work here, hasn't he? Luckily, it's not underneath any small grub screws, which is what Shimano used to do, but he has managed to, I'm not going to blame Ollie for this, because it could well have been Hank, Opie, Lloydie, Si, I don't know, it could have been anyone. But yeah, the shift cables used to be underneath a little grub screw on some STI levers, so we just need to peel that back and actually get that shift cable out. Because I peel back the hood, good news, I've got easy access now to that clamping screw. So we'll slide it up onto the bar. And how cool is this? I don't have to do any guesswork, any judge work. We've got handy indication lines printed onto the sides of these bars, meaning, oh yes, it's going to be oh so simple, this bit. I do like things like that when it just happens, because you don't have to worry about lining them up and getting at your spirit level or anything. Although, just need to look at the side and make sure they're in a decent place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put it 5 down. Oh, and by the way, no one yet has sent in, or I mean, I guess maybe the postman has got a bad back because he's been carrying in so many donations of handlebar tape after I requested them. But no, we haven't seen any yet, so I'm not going to be wrapping the bars. So you've still got time to send it in before the pro bike. Good feel that. All right. And then yeah, they did the other lever as well. They've handily cabled up that one for me. Bit of a nightmare. Thanks, guys. I'm only joking. I'm sure they did it just to help, because, well, the cables were probably loose all over their desk as well. That's why they've done it. I just thought they were doing me a favour. That's all good. We can always fiddle around with these bits afterwards, but generally the more you do at this stage, the better. If you do have cables, by the way, at home, never store them awkwardly. If anything, I've got a load of old brake cables and gear cables, or new ones, and I actually keep them as straight as possible, sort of like dangled over 2 screws at either end. Don't coil them up, or try not to. When they come from the factory coiled up, they're done really well, but quite often when we try and do it ourselves, we don't quite have the technique. You don't want a kinked cable. A kinked cable is just going to give you bad shifting, bad performance. We're going to put an outer gear cable on first, and put it into the cable stop here. Of course, it's then going to be a uncovered cable. You could actually on this bike run a fully cabled outer all the way to the rear derailleur, but then you're going to have to use some zip ties and it's not going to look quite as pretty. So we're going to do that. Just thread it through the under cable, the guide underneath the bottom bracket, and then thread everything else through. Of course, we have actually got a special piece of cable that came with this bike. Came with the derailleur. So it's pre-lubed, it's got a liner inside of it and everything, and that'll just easily go in like so. That'll go down in there. Nice little loop that, for that shifting. But yeah, we're going to cut some outer cable and just make sure that it's fine. So I've got my outer gear cable here, freshly cut off the ends, and also had a little pick and just rounded off those insides, or sort of really made them quite big. That way the inner cable can work really smoothly and efficiently inside. I am going to put ferrules on the end. They're not all shift levers actually accept ferrules in, but these ones, I'm led to believe they do anyway, so we'll have a look. We'll thread that inner cable through. The moment of truth. Yeah, oh, that is going through oh so smooth. That is a relief. It always pays to use decent cable on these things. So put that into the end of the lever there, you can see. There we go. That's going to be enough cable too, once it goes into that cable stop. I'm going to put a different ferrule on the end of the outer cable there to try and stop any dirt, grime, rubbish, road debris, you name it, from flying up inside. So I've got one here with a sort of tail on it, and that will hopefully do the job of that. And of course you want to make sure that ferrules are pushed onto the end of the cable so that there's no ghost shifting, ghost braking, anything like that. Right, let's chuck it through there. Oh, don't need to actually, it's got a slot in the bottom which makes it even easier to install. In a minute I'm just going to loosely tape on this outer cable onto the handlebars just to keep it in position in a little while. First up, let's just put that gear cable through that guide, through to the rear end, through the outer cable, and we can clamp it into place and then play around with the indexing. I say play around, fix it. All right. Of course, these rear derailleurs have got the bolt for clamping the cable down in such an unusual, almost awkward place. I'm not going to say, I guess it's not really that awkward, but it's just unusual when you're so used to them being somewhere else. Just clamp that up. Right, so if we push that hood back in place now. We can get the gear lever working properly. There we are. Good news. The rear derailleur is working A-OK. Play around with the cable tension shortly, but essentially it's good that it's all working fine now. I'm just going to tape that cable in position, just with it's bugging me a little bit really. Stop it from flapping around. No one wants flappy cables. Actually, we could do the chain now, but there's no real reason to. I'd rather get all the cabling done and out of the way really, because it's then you've got some sort of system going on. So I've got some brake outer cable here. So here we are. What have we got? What did I bring in? Of course, you know if it's a brake cable because the strands on the inside are like a spiral all the way. There's a little bit of compression in it, whereas with shift cable, the inner strands all run in one line. I've actually got a bit of red cable here. I was tempted to go a little bit funky on this bike, but I'm not funky. But besides, it would match, you wouldn't be able to see. But let's look then at these strands. Hopefully we can pick this up. You see that? They all run in one long line. So they just come out. There's no spiral whatsoever. They're just like that. The reason being then you can't compress it when you're changing gear. When you're putting through all that shifting pressure, these cables, they just can't, there's nowhere for it to go. Okay, which one to do, front or back? Oh, let's do the back one first. So we are going to use ferrules on these because again, we're going to use it off-road, so we don't want bits of mud to be coming on the inside of the cables and give poor braking. Braking's pretty important. The only thing I'm unsure of on this bike is whether or not the cable, that this is an internal cable, you can see here, enters just there, exits there. If there's a channel inside, it looks like there is, or a guide of some sort, because if not, this is going to be a bit of a pain. I'm going to have to take the seat post out and everything. So well, cross your fingers for me, but let's try and thread it through first of all. It sounds, oh no. Oh, what a result. I'm just very, very happy about that, because if it wasn't, like I say, it would have been an absolute nightmare. So we will route it just like so. Now I'm going to put, like I say, a ferrule on the end there, and have a bit of a, don't really want too much of a sharp curve on there or anything. We could get away with something like that, be all right. Back brake, don't use that much. Anyway, no, in all seriousness, you use the front brake more. Loads of you will remember as well, I always have my rear brake on the right, so that's why I'm going to be going to this lever. Also, it gives you a smoother line if you look. So where it's going to enter there, it's not going to have such a tight bend going around, and it's not going to have such a horrible and unsightly brake cable or brake outer cable. So just need to chop that down and then thread that inner through it before all of the real cable work comes into play. Good quality cable cutters, worth their weight in gold. You want to do it in one smooth, sharp bit like that, and then hopefully you get a nice smooth end like I have. You lot don't realise how happy I am. I'm not showing it, but inside, oh, I'm so chuffed that that cable was channeled or routed through. That would have been awful. Truly, truly awful. So let's take that out just temporarily. And then pull it through. I'm hoping that this accepts a ferrule, because they don't always. Surprise, surprise. I don't need a ferrule on the end. There we are. Some Shimano levers do, some don't. You live and you learn. Fine and dandy in there. The good thing actually about not having to use a ferrule on there, sometimes if you sweat a lot, they can get corroded on the inside of the plastic housing. I don't know how, I don't really want to know why either. Well, I know why, it's because of sweat, but they become stuck in there and they are a real pain to get out. You have to faff around with a flat bladed screwdriver to try and get rid of them. I've wasted many an hour in a workshop trying to do that when we had a heavy sweater among us. No names, they know who they are. There we are. Now basically it's just about repeating the same thing for the front brake cable. In a moment, taping it on. It's a little bit long possibly, so let's take a little bit of that length out of there. Right. Now time to use these cable hangers. So, see there's a little hole there, that's for the cable, those brake cables to go through, and then it's slotted there too, so you can go all the way through. Some people, they like to have all sorts of weird angles and everything going on, really wide, all depends on the stance of the cantilevers you've got. There were some called frog's legs, very popular with cyclocross riders, that kind of thing, but really, you want it to be, so that straddle wire just do its job. Generally I tend to have them about in line at the front with the headset cup, so that's about there. This is where you want it to be pretty tight as well, these. There we go. It's not going to move anywhere. Good. We've got these straddle cables, so I'm going to leave that temporarily uncut. You can see how it works now, these brakes. They go through that hanger, and then this wire, this brake cable then clamps just in there, and then that is how the cantilever brakes work. Of course, there's quite a lot of tension actually within the springs of these brakes, which allow them to release, tighten. It's so long since I've worked on these sorts of brakes. It's amazing, really. Still got it though, still got it. So we will pull that through. And there is actually a tool for this called the third hand tool. So it's where it holds in the both sides. It's not the easiest thing in the world to sort of do, really. But we're going to use an 8mm, I think it is on these. Is it an 8? Yeah, it's an 8mm. So we're going to hold that in. Of course, if you haven't got a third hand tool, you could use an old toe strap or something like that to hold those brakes in. I think we've even got a third hand tool here. We do. There we go. This is it. Essentially, it grabs and it clamps the cable, and you can pull through loads of pressure like that, and then you can tighten it up. So it works like so. You can see there. Just pull through a bit more. Really, you need to find out that exact position where you want it to be. Cantilevers. You can see why they went out of fashion, can't you? They were a nightmare to set up, let alone let alone their braking performance. Nah, things just moved on. It's good. It's good to have a change. All right, let's get that in place. I've never really used these tools. I've never really had a reason to, I guess. I've always managed to actually use an old toe strap, believe it or not. There's the old-fashioned person in me coming out. All right, let's do up that. We use a little spanner to get in there, it's going to be much easier. Of course, these cantilevers, they are micro adjust too. You've got a little grub screw there on the left-hand side, but sometimes you just actually had to bend the springs to get them to work really efficiently. So, there we go. I've probably done that up too tight. Yeah, I have, but a few pulls of get everything settling in. You can see now, I need to just cut that cable down in a moment. I won't do it yet. On one side, I just need to work on that grub screw just to undo it a little bit, and we can then have them working in symmetry. Decent braking. Working okay. Look at that. Oh, cantilevers. Nightmare. Right, so we'll cut those cables down. We'll put a cable end on them. Try and get it fairly short. Oh, I should fray that one. Although, I can put that in place. Nobody will ever know. apart from you lot. Cable stretched just ever so slightly. And we are good, so I can just take those on before I do the handlebar tape. Oh yeah, the rear one, I've got to do that. Right, so that one done. Put through that straddle wire and it's going to be nice and sorted. Bless him, Doddy even came over and fitted these on, and he's lined them up perfectly with the wheels and everything. Might do a bit of modification on this bike too. I might get a different seat post. 29.4 is the measurement on it. Yeah, not got a great variety of choice for that, but I think I know where I can get one from pretty cheap. And in black as well, because that'll look really good. Original saddle on this bike too. Somewhere I've even got the original wheels that came with it, or I think it might have been a Saracen after this. But anyway, I've got them. They're Wolber, and they've got this same pretty cool like checker style logo on it. Right, anyway, enough of the chit chat. Let's cable it up. Oh, sorry, let's cable it up, chain it up. After a while, when you're working in a workshop, you learn to do things as quickly as possible. Especially if you're borrowing things from other people, you can never always find them because people have a tendency to borrow things and don't put them back. Yep, that's right. All those comments on the GCN Tech Show. What's happened to spanner number 13 behind you and stuff like that? I don't know. I wish I did know. I wish I knew who took it. Okay, let's fit this chain. Well, actually, let's measure it up first of all before we have to cut it down. I've got a split link, joining link, really quick, easy, piece of cake. Those things are a real relief these days. Quick links. Whoever invented them, I don't know actually who did invent them, but whoever did, absolute godsend. You can actually use for this a shoelace, a zip tie, all sorts to actually get the right amount of tension there. But there we go. So put that into place. Of course, I do need to make sure that the gears are working. Right now they're not, and also I need to make sure I don't make the same mistake as what I've done there. I've actually routed, can you believe it, the chain on the wrong side. I wasn't paying attention. So you've got a little thing here, you need to make sure that the chain is on the right side of that. And I've done it on the wrong side. Mistakes do happen. As much as I like a chain pre-greased like this one, do make them ever so slippery when you're trying to do your work. Right, but there we are, that's in line. Put that in. There. Right. Right, I'm pretty sure I can cut that cable down a little bit shorter now, so I can actually operate gears okay, and it's not gonna make a right old racket. So I'll put a cable end on that. Again, you want to make sure you do that as soon as possible. Once they start to fray, you're in trouble. There we are. I need to do that cable tension up a little bit more because it's, as you can see, that's pretty loose there. So I could get away with tightening that barrel adjuster, but it's not really the dumb thing. Not around here, not on my watch, people. So I'm gonna pull that cable through just with a pair of pliers actually, because the hands by now were a little bit slippery. So we'll get that. We'll undo that. It's a little bit noisy depending on what gear you're in, but in essence, we've got ourselves, you've guessed it, a gravel bike or an adventure bike. I really like this now. Brilliant, absolutely love it. Right, all it needs to do is have some handlebar tape on it. So remember, send it in. there we are, the build done. I've actually really enjoyed doing this because working on cantilever bikes was, well, probably the first type of bike I ever worked on, so it brought back some good memories, and it's good to have this bike back on the trails or the gravel, wherever we're going to take it. Do need to put some pedals on there and probably play around with that chain line too, as well as maybe a different bottom bracket in there as well. But I've really enjoyed it. All I'm looking for now is some handlebar tape. So you know the drill, just send some in. And I don't want something in a horrific colour. Actually, no, I don't really mind. But we are going to have to do some sort of challenge or test or evaluation of this bike and see exactly how it handles off-road. So keep an eye on the channel for that one too. Also, have you got any ideas of conversions or rejuvenations of old bikes that you'd like me to try and tackle? I've enjoyed them, so yeah, let me know down there in the comment section below. And as ever, remember to like and share this video with your friends too. Give it a big old thumbs up, and also remember to check out the GCN shop at shop.globalcyclingnetwork.com. And now for 2 more great videos, part 1 on why I chose this frame, and part 2 all about the components. Well, click just down here and just down here. And I'm going to take this bike down memory lane. Sort of.